From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
Just as the temps are dropping, natural gas prices are heating up. Plus, once a leader, a DUI conviction has now cost this Central Kansan his job representing you in Topeka. But first, another Kansas abortion law blocked in court. What does this mean for abortion access across the state? And how will lawmakers react? That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. Hello everyone, this is Kansas Week and I'm Chris Frank in for Pilar Pedraza. Now before we get to those stories we teased, we have a late breaking story to add to our discussion here. Sedgwick County Election Commissioner Angela Cadillo resigns after less than 2 years on the job, according to the Secretary of State's office Friday afternoon. Quote, Angela faithfully served Sedgwick County and the state, and we are grateful for her knowledge and skill in administering safe and secure elections, Secretary of State Scott Schwab said in a release. Secretary Schwab also said, when resources and needs are not met and the political environment toward election officials is hostile, we lose talent. It is hard to see a good public servant leave, Schwab says. Details regarding the process of selecting another election commissioner would be announced in the coming days. So first, let us introduce our panel. What does all this mean? Joining me this week to break down that story and others, we have Sherman Smith, editor of the Kansas Reflector, here by Zoom. On the desk, we got Republican State Senator John Dahl from Garden City, and Democrat Representative John Carmichael of Wichita joins us. So I might start with you, Representative Carmichael. You're here in Wichita locally, and this is Sedgwick County Election Commissioner Cadillo, who resigned. What do you make of this, and including some of the statements Secretary Schwab made about hostile environments and things like that?
Well, I've been involved in elections in this county since the mid-90s. I've known and worked with and or for every election commissioner since 91, I think it was. Ms. Cadillo has had a difficult time. She came to the office with no experience in elections. She was thrown into an office where the staff had all quit because the Secretary of State, in essence, fired Tabitha Lehman, who did an excellent job. He failed to accommodate her disability. She had cancer and she needed to work remotely. He wouldn't let her do it. He waited till the election was over. He fired her. Then he replaced her with someone that had no experience. Then Ms. Cadillo suffered the wrath of some county commissioners who didn't like the way she ran the office, didn't like the way some numbers came in late on some elections, wouldn't give her the budget to do her job, wouldn't allow the commissioner to send out postcards for advance ballots. We had a disastrous election in the primary as far as late returns. We had more mistakes in November. So it comes as no surprise that Ms. Cadillo, for personal reasons, decided it was perhaps best to move on. But what we really need to look at is, are we selecting election officers in the best way? Should it really be a partisan, if you will, appointment by the Secretary of State, or should we have an independent commission of some type that runs Kansas elections? That's something we ought to be thinking about.
And maybe it'll come up, we don't know.
Well, maybe it will, but right now, Scott Schwab, who's a Republican, holds all the cards and all the marbles, and we have a Republican-dominated legislature. So I'm not sure this is the year that that's going to happen. But in the long term, that's what we ought to look at, is having seasoned professionals running elections who are not partisans and not necessarily appointed by a partisan Secretary of State.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the comments, and we'll see what comes in the coming days.
And I'm hopeful that they will find someone very well qualified. If I was the Secretary of State, I'd rehire Ms. Lehman tomorrow, and she's a Republican, by the way.
No. Well, we'll see if that happens to be in the cards.
Probably not.
All right. Well, moving on, abortion access was at the center of the 2022 primary election turnout, with conservative lawmakers saying a failure to amend the state constitution would lead to all current abortion regulations being overturned in court. Centrists and liberals disagreed, but a ruling in Shawnee County is raising questions once again. Shawnee County District Court Judge Teresa Watson granted a temporary injunction barring enforcement of a law that bans Kansas women from seeking abortion pills through telemedicine appointments. Abortion rights advocates say the decision will help expand access to abortion for Kansans, particularly in rural areas several hours from clinics. Trust Women in Wichita originally challenged the law in court. The group's executive director released a statement to KMUW which said in part, quote, "Access to telemedicine services for Kansans will go a long way to easing the strain on our reproductive health care systems in the state," end of quote. The director of government relations with Kansans for Life told KMUW, quote, "While it's disappointing, it's certainly not surprising. It's just one of the many limits that are protective for women and their children that abortion providers have fought and will continue to fight," end of quote. Trust Women says it could still be several months before clinics begin offering the option because it will take time to work out the details. Meanwhile, the case continues its way through the court system. Well, Senator John Dahl of Garden City, the abortion opponents are adamant that this is exactly what the proposed Constitution was supposed to prevent. Would it have?
I think that the election itself was very clear on how Kansans feel about this. And so the election itself would have probably stopped all of this. But for the record, I'm pro-life, have been. But also for the record, I'm very much a localist. And I think what they can have in Wichita, what they can have in Kansas City, we're talking about abortions with telemedicine, I think should be afforded to everyone, regardless whether you live in rural or urban areas. So I'm very interested to see how this goes because, you know, with Representative Carmichael and and his colleagues from Sedgwick County and all the colleagues from Johnson County want something, there's nothing we can do to stop it. So, you know, I think sometimes in rural Kansas we get ignored. Mm-hmm. And I think we should have the same rights that they have there. So that's where I stand on that.
All right, thanks. And Representative Carmichael, does this, again, it's a temporary injunction, increase the chance of more abortion legislation making its way through the State House this next session, or does it really matter?
Well, the fact of the matter is it may not matter. I've not read Judge Watson's decision, but I presume she grounded it on the Hoday's decision, which is the right to bodily autonomy. That decision doesn't say you cannot place restrictions on abortion. It just says if you do, you have to meet a stringent test, cut to the strict scrutiny test, to explain why it is the legislation is needed. And the judge hasn't really ruled on that yet. This is a preliminary injunction or a temporary injunction. There will be a full trial on the merits. It will go back to the Court of Appeals and probably on to the Supreme Court, and we will know at some point what the final outcome is. But in the meantime, Senator Dahl's constituents will soon be able to take advantage of telemedicine for reproductive needs, just as they are for any other medical need, and that's important for people in rural areas.
Well, this next question for Sherman Smith with the Kansas Reflector. Kansas is one of just 7 states that permit abortions but ban this form of abortion, even though KDHE reports that medication abortions by pill make up more than 2/3 of abortions in Kansas. Now, which of those is a sign of what Kansas voters really want?
You know, I think it's a little difficult to say what they want on every little thing. I think overall we know that Kansas voters do want some access to reproductive health care rights. And I just think this is one of a number of restrictions that Kansas laws put in place that will be a little difficult to justify in the court system. A number of laws that supporters of reproductive health rights say are really just designed to harass women. There are laws that require women to get counseling that discourages them from having an abortion, to get an ultrasound and look at the image, and then wait 24 hours to go through with the procedure. And then a law like this that banned telemedicine from prescribing the most commonly used form of abortion in Kansas. I think a lot of these laws are going to be up for debate in the coming months or years. Some of the other restrictions that are in place, a 22-week ban, for instance, might be a little bit more solid. But I would be surprised if we don't see some legislation come up in the upcoming session that tries to, for instance, move that 22-week cutoff to 15 weeks, or take some other restrictions into consideration.
Right. Well, we all know abortion discussion will continue on with more laws going through the courts, as well as questions there in the House and Senate. But moving on, the majority of Kansas state workers are underpaid. That's the conclusion of a new survey examining wages at comparable in-state employers and surrounding state governments in Nebraska, Oklahoma, Missouri, among others. The Kansas Reflector reports the State Department of Administration report showed Kansas pays law clerks 32% below market rates, social worker supervisors 22% below, driver's license examiners 1% below, and chemists 13% below. In fact, 7 out of 10 categories in the study were earning below the market rate for their position. But not everyone. Kansas Highway Patrol's master troopers are getting paid 30% more than their peers, while Capital Area Guards get 27% more, and other safety and security officers earn 20% more than the market rate. The question is, should lawmakers adjust pay across the board, as it did last year, or provide more flexibility to allow supervisors with the most underpaid employees to help them catch up with the market rate? Well, there are a lot of numbers there, of course. Sherman, I have a question for you. What, if any, concern does this report raise in your mind about Kansas being able to retain and attract the best employees?
I think this is a concern that state agencies have had for a long, long time, and there's many years that they went without any kind of raise at all before state finances kind of turned around and allowed that to happen. And so I think this report just helps really put some numbers to it to say this is how bad it is for various professions. They looked at private sector jobs that were comparable in Kansas. They also looked at state employees in the neighboring states to draw these comparisons or to get these conclusions. But the debate is always, how do you try to balance the scale? Do you target the ones who are most out of whack with their peers, or do you, try to do this flat raise like they did the last go around? I think we heard from legislators, as we have in the past, we heard at this hearing this week that there isn't a lot of enthusiasm for just gifting a flat raise to everybody. They want to make it merit-based.
All right, Representative Carmichael, how does something like this, a report like this, go over with lawmakers? Because it's the lawmakers ultimately that have to make the purse string decisions.
Well, I think Sherman's colleague Tim Carpenter's article is a good one, and it really opened some eyes, at least for me as I read it. The problem is more, though, than just pay alone. It's also the classified versus unclassified employment system, and that relates to a desire by some to make state employees, at-will employees, subject to merit raises or no raises at all, depending upon the whim of their supervisor. One of the reasons that people go to work for government is because of what's known as civil service protections. That's one of the reasons that state employees everywhere typically are paid less than market wages in the private sector. You have a good retirement plan, you have job protection from discriminatory or arbitrary salary increases or discipline by your employer. And that's one of the big issues that's also behind this, and that's what the fight is really about when we talk about merit increases versus 5% across the board increases.
Right. And it's interesting that sometimes in other countries, sometimes they go to work for the government because it pays higher, but not necessarily here. So what happens if Kansas doesn't do anything to equalize pay rates?
Well, I think we will lose good employees for sure. The other thing, though, that is kind of, that plays in this, and Representative Carmichael hit on this, that the classified versus non-classified, they tried several years ago back, probably 8 years ago, to get a lot of people who are classified employees, and they were going to give them a raise or whatever to non-classified, which they lose a ton of benefits, lose retirement, lose much, but they were saying, if you want a raise, you got to become unclassified. One of the things too that, you know, anytime you're talking about salary, not only in this or anything else, is what benefits are given to those employees. So when I see a raise and everything, I like to see what other, you know, what's their retirement, what's their health plan, and those sort of things, because that all adds in. And I'm not saying that ours is better than Nebraska or Colorado or anyone else. I just would like to see that before you really jump into it hard.
Yeah. Anybody have any?
Yeah, could I stick my comment in here? The first thing is, we also hurt the state retirement plan severely during the Brownback administration. We turned it into the equivalent of an underfunded 401k, and that makes it less advantageous for people to come to work for the state or to stay in state employment. The second thing is, the reason the Highway Patrol and the Capitol Police are paid above scale is because we were hemorrhaging Highway Patrol officers at a rapid rate to adjoining states, and the then superintendent came in and lobbied hard and got his troopers a raise, which also benefited the Capitol Police. So that's how it happens. Is it better, though, to take an overall look at our wage and salary scale in a competitive marketplace? Of course it is, so we don't have anomalies like was described in the story we saw a moment ago.
Oh, that's interesting, because you took the question right out of my mouth, and yet the issue of pay and pay raises is not just a state one, but even today with the jobs numbers and the pay numbers coming out at the federal level, there's concern about, you know, pay being an inflationary matter.
Inflationary pressures sometimes are driven by pay increases, and the state could find itself in a circumstance where we're chasing private enterprise in order to maintain the quality people that citizens rely upon.
All right. Well, we're going to have to move on. Well, there will be lots of new faces in the Kansas House and the Senate. The Senate will look mostly the same, though not identical. Not after an embattled senator announced his resignation months after a DUI arrest torpedoed his legislative career. Kansas Senator Gene Solentrop has announced his intention to step down from his seat sometime in this upcoming month. In 2021, the Kansas Highway Patrol arrested Senator Solentrop on charges of driving under the influence and reckless driving. Troopers say he was driving on the wrong side of the road on I-70 and wouldn't stop when they tried pulling him over. They eventually had to use stop sticks to halt his car. A judge sentenced Solentrop to 6 months for DUI and 90 days for reckless driving after he pled no contest to the charges. However, the judge suspended all but 2 days of Solentrop's sentence. As part of a deal, prosecutors dropped the felony charge of running from law enforcement. Senate President Ty Masterson's office says Senator Solentrop of Wichita sent in an email detailing his intent of resigning. Solentrop has been in the Senate for around 5 years and spent 7 years in the Kansas House. One of Masterson's staffers, Chase Blasey, plans to run for Solentrop's seat. No others have announced their candidacy at this time. Republican leadership from Solentrop's district will pick his replacement. All right, Sherman Smith with the Kansas Reflector. You've covered state politics, the legislature up there in Topeka. Any surprise with this resignation?
I think the surprise is that it didn't happen much sooner, like immediately after the news came out, because it was such a shocking sequence of events. I think the question though is why not, if he knew he was going to step down, why not do it in time for somebody else to be on the ballot and let the voters decide who is going to finish this term?
Well, what about that, Representative Carmichael? Why don't we have special elections on this?
Well, if Senator Sullentrop would have done the right thing months ago, the voters would have picked his successor in November. Instead, what happened is the Senate President's hand-picked man from his own staff, Mr. Blasey, took a job at Evergy as a lobbyist, and now he intends to go to the state legislature. By his last report, he intends to keep working as a lobbyist for Evergy. He just won't be voting on Evergy-related bills, and that's really bad idea. I hope folks reconsider that one.
Any insight on who might be picked? I mean, as a Republican?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious where the pick's going to be.
Okay.
And it's too bad that it happened like it happened, but I'm not, politics, it might have been designed. I'm not saying it was, but it very much could have been.
Well, how can we be surprised about that, right? Well, moving on, the price to heat our homes is on the rise again as we head into the coldest months of the year. Experts say, beware, every time we turn up that thermostat, the bill will likely be higher than anyone expects. Cake's Jackson Overstreet explains.
As the skies go gray and the temperatures drop, you may start looking to your thermostat for some relief from the cold. This year, it's going to cost you.
I have noticed a steady incline to the point it's becoming almost unmanageable.
Julia Lucas is talking about her gas bill. The single mother says between the rise in that bill, along with prices going up in other areas like food, it's forced her to look for extra cash.
I have a full-time job, so I've started a second and third job just to try to get ahead. And I'm not even getting ahead.
And that high gas bill might not be getting much better for Lucas or any other Kansan.
We do anticipate that customer bills will be higher in the coming months. What we've seen is that the demand for natural gas has grown faster than production.
The Kansas Corporation Commission sent out a consumer alert at the end of October, warning Kansans about the potential price increases due to natural gas supplies. At that time, it said bills could be as high as 33% more than last year. Right now, the KCC says it hasn't gotten that bad just yet.
Wholesale prices have come down. The pass-through prices that we've seen utilities passing through to customers have come down 15 to 20%.
While natural gas prices will keep that final bill high, there are some ways to save a few bucks.
Seal off those unused rooms to prevent unnecessary heating. Remember to have your temperature on your water heater set at 120 degrees Fahrenheit or the warm setting.
Yeah. Well, a couple of years ago, lawmakers made some financial aid available after the polar vortex. Anything that you think they can expect like this now?
That we're still paying for that, and I think something like this is kind of needs to be done at a local level with local charities and issues like that. You know, we can't expect government to always help, but you know, with the war in Ukraine, people had to expect something like this was going to happen.
Right. So is that just part of it? I mean, the KCC is supposed to control rising cost to only what's necessary, but a lot of Kansas don't think that
There's strong reason to believe that those high prices during the polar vortex were as a result of price fixing. Okay. There's a lawsuit now pending by the city of Mulberry, but the state attorney general, as far as we can tell, has done nothing to try to recover the losses that were suffered by Kansans. Right now, Southern Star Pipeline, the price is up 23% for natural gas as of today compared with this time last year. Add to that increase the $10 per month roughly that we're going to be paying for the polar vortex event, and people are going to be cold this winter. It's a serious problem, and I hope the new Attorney General acts.
All right. Well, we've got one more story. Finally today, how much is too much to protect a list some think shouldn't even exist. It's a question the city of Wichita has to answer.
The city of Wichita has spent more than $150,000 in legal fees alone to defend against lawsuits over the WPD's use of a gang list. The Reflector says the ACLU filed the suit on behalf of the youth group Progeny, saying Wichita police have unilateral power to designate a resident as a gang member based on unreliable evidence or even without evidence. Things like the color of clothing they wear, the people they know, the businesses they visit, or the neighborhood where they live. There is no way for an individual to challenge being placed on the list. The lawsuit says individuals on the gang list are subjected to constant surveillance, harassment, and housing and employment discrimination. The Reflector got copies of the city's contract with the law firm and monthly payments made through an open records request. According to the Reflector, the contract pays hourly fees of up to $200 for top attorneys at the firm, and travel is billed at half the hourly rate, excluding travel between Topeka and Wichita. The city and others involved in the lawsuit had until Thursday to settle, or depositions would begin. That didn't happen. The discovery process could significantly add to city expenses.
Well, there are a lot of numbers there. Sherman, what's the most important detail to you?
Well, the bill for legal fees for November was $37,000, and that's at a point where the judge had basically paused the litigation to say, why don't the two of you try to work out an agreement and resolve this? And because they missed that deadline of Thursday to work out that agreement, now they move forward with depositions and other discovery items to prepare for an eventual trial, while also continuing to try to reach a settlement. That means this could get a whole lot more expensive very quickly over the next few weeks.
Thanks, Sherman, and thanks to all of you here. You know, this is a pledge time, and coming up right after this Kansas Week, we want you to stay tuned for Kansas Ghost Towns. I particularly am involved in that, so I want you to watch.
I've seen it. It's excellent.
Hey, so there's an endorsement right there. So that does it for us today. Once again, thanks to Sherman, John, both Johns for joining us, and thank you for watching. We'd also like to extend our thanks to our media partners at KSN News, the Wichita Eagle, and Cake News for sharing their materials with us. We'd like to end by asking you your opinion on any of our stories. You just get in contact with us. Right now, that's it. So we'll stay tuned for Kansas Ghost Towns.